locked arms with a villain to take down a villain. We allowed Stalin to continue the mass murder of Christians, which had been going on for a long time, obviously. The Bolshevik Revolution, which took place before he was in power, right? What happened under Lenin? The massacre of Christians, the creation of concentration camps, the Gulag system. There's Christians being mass drowned in barges. So if this was about preventing an ethnic cleansing, if that really is the story of World War II that we are taught in our classrooms, we had to prevent this ethnic cleansing, which in my view, by the way, is always an admirable goal. Why were we never taught that the good guys, being us, then committed an ethnic cleansing?
Because that's not what happened. So, listen, this is the problem with videos like this, the 5-minute touch on a topic that honestly extends over 55 years of history and information, and even more than that in some cases when you get into European history. I'm not here to make Candace Owens look bad. I can't possibly do that. She's intelligent, she's smart, she is beautiful, and she is a staple in the conservative community. I just happen to not disagree with her. I'm just here to go ahead and present why she's wrong. And she's not wrong on everything. There's some things that are extremely accurate in her statement, but most of it is conclusions without context. Now, I know what Facebook does. I know what big social media does, and I want to add context to this. And it's all about somebody's perspective or opposite interpretation, the antithetical version of what that person said. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm simply going to tell you some of the things that she says. The conclusion she has come to is wrong. It's inaccurate, and it's another version of history. I'm going to give you the numbers. I'm going to give you the dates. I'm going to give you to the conclusions that I've spent a lifetime studying, and we'll see what you think. Give me 15 seconds, and we will be right back.
Do you want the truth? Are you tired of being so confused? You feel like you're more f***ed up than the lies on the evening news? Well, just step right in. We can talk about it all as friends. And if you want, we can...
Still Point, STIILPOINT, the Donut Friendly Band. Give them a listen on iTunes, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your music. Go down to the local Sam Goody and pick up their album. Matthew Spear from the Donut Friendly Show. Thanks for watching. I'm going to play this in full context. I can't stand it when shows play 30 seconds here and 1 minute here. I always try to play the full video so that person, as if they were sitting right next to me and they were going to make a valid and lucid argument, and then I can retort. And that's what I want to do here. I want to give Candace Owens her due. She deserves it. To have her voice represented in the most effective way possible, which is in its entirety. So here it is, 5 minutes. I want you to listen to this, and then I will address each point after she is done. Here it is.
And factually speaking, even though today the media says you can't debate whether or not dropping the atom bomb was necessary, it was always something that the generals, the commanding generals in the U.S. Army even, said was not necessary. This is a direct quote from General Henry H. Arnold, who was the commanding general of the U.S. Army under Truman. He said, "It always appeared to us that atomic bomb or no atomic bomb, the Japanese were already on the verge of collapse." Just behind him, by the way, Eisenhower. He agreed. He said, quote, "Japan was at the moment seeking some way to surrender with minimum loss of face." So that was agreed upon. How do the people today dispute that narrative? Or actually, a better question is, why do people today, why are the people in the media that are trying to dispute that narrative, trying to convince you that mass killing people is okay, necessary, and also sometimes good? Here's a reality. We have been buried in the belief that we had to join the war because we had to free the Jews from concentration camps. And yet, what is not told to us is that we also then allowed Stalin to continue those concentration camps. We locked arms with a villain to take down a villain. We allowed Stalin to continue the mass murder of Christians, which had been going on for a long time, obviously. The Bolshevik Revolution, which took place before he was in power, right? What happened under Lenin? The massacre of Christians, the creation of concentration camps, the Gulag system. There's Christians being mass drowned in barges. So if this was about preventing an ethnic cleansing, if that really is the story of World War II that we are taught in our classrooms, we had to prevent this ethnic cleansing, which in my view, by the way, is always an admirable goal, why were we never taught that the good guys, being us, then committed an ethnic cleansing immediately thereafter? Why were we not taught that we allowed collective guilt to be assigned to people who simply spoke German, had nothing to do with Adolf Hitler, did not vote for Adolf Hitler? Yeah, I learned that recently watching a BBC documentary, as it was casually brought up to me by a priest in London. He said Americans don't know anything. It's you guys are just so severely propagandized. You know nothing about what's happened in wars. You know nothing about the war crimes that were committed even by the West. And he shared with me this documentary entitled The Savage Peace. And I want to show you guys a little bit of that right now. Take a listen.
Local Germans are forced to confront the horrors of the Third Reich. A lampshade made of human skin, human organs in jars, and half a severed head. Notions of collective guilt and punishment for such atrocities meant that few were prepared to contemplate the idea of Germans as victims, especially in countries that had borne the brunt of Nazi atrocities.
So in case you're not following what happened, they're following the war. They had tables that were laying out in villages, and they showed them sever heads, and they showed them people that were killed and put their heads in jars and said, look, this is what the Nazis did. So don't feel bad about what we're about to do to Germans next. Essentially, they effectively propagandized people in local villages to give them permission to mass murder innocent civilians and innocent children, and that's what they did. Which is why after watching this documentary, I tweeted this: Americans know nothing about real history. Did you know that 12 million Germans were ethnically cleansed after World War II? Did you know 500,000 of them were murdered for the crime of speaking German, that children were lined up and shot? Well over 2 million women and children were raped at the end of the war. Many of them died or killed themselves as a result. In Czechoslovakia, they lined German civilians up, many of whom had lived there for centuries, and ran over their legs with trucks. They forced them to dig their own graves. Not all of them were German. Some of them just spoke German. 12 million German civilians were expelled across Eastern Europe, forced stripped of their homes and property and citizenry for the crime of speaking German. Hundreds of thousands of them starved to death. This ethnic expulsion was the largest in human history, and yet you've never heard about it. Why? That's a question I have for you. Why had we never heard about it? Well, because then it becomes harder for us to consider what actually went on. What was the true purpose for us getting involved in World War II? If we were going to commit the very same crimes, ethnically cleanse people, put them into concentration camps, kill them, kill their children, line them up and shoot them. It's not good. I'll ask you another question. Why are they almost more controlling over the World War II narrative today than they were many years ago? Well, the answer for that, in my opinion, is because they're trying to slow walk us into World War III.
There's so many things to touch on. Quickly, jars and lampshades made of skin. There's a lot of rumors that OSS, which was created and founded by Wild Bill Donovan in World War II, was really a paramilitary style group that worked with MacArthur, that worked with Patton, and predominantly in the U.S. Filipino Islands to create guerrilla warfare tactics and hold the Japanese indefinitely as a key strategic point. OSS worked heavily with counter-espionage tactics, interrogation, and assassination attempts in German-occupied Europe and in Germany, which later became the CIA. The OSS became the Central Intelligence Agency. So there is a lot of speculation that it was propaganda, that it was to mask what happened. To say that the Germans, specifically the Nazis, weren't into the occult, that weren't into horrible experiments against Jews, that they didn't dismember and save certain body parts, is ridiculous. Of course they did. And this is well documented. Collected their gold teeth, the shoes also that people say, well, why would they save their shoes? Why would they collect shoes? There comes to a point when you're cremating and gassing so many people that you have to ask yourself the question, where do we put all these damn shoes? People like to believe that there's so much propaganda with the Holocaust, and I'm not going to entertain those people, just like I'm not going to entertain flat earthers. It's just not going to happen, because the level of communication that is required between that argument and the other person across the table, I would have to lower myself to a point where I'm just not going to do it anymore. I don't have the energy or patience, but I will address pretty much everything else in this video. Point number 1, the necessity of dropping the atomic bomb. Owens quotes General Henry Arnold and Dwight Eisenhower, suggesting that Japan was on the verge of collapse and that the atomic bomb was unnecessary to begin with. The counterpoint to this whole argument is several U.S. military leaders expressed reservations about the necessity of the atomic bomb. This is true. And it's crucial to consider the broader context and the diversity of opinions at time. Not the diversity around the table, because they were a bunch of white men, but the diversity of thought. And there wasn't a collective agreement, as often in military decisions, especially with the Joint Chiefs. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, and then Nagasaki just a few days later, it aimed to force Japan's swift and unconditional surrender, thereby avoiding a prolonged and bloody invasion. The first bomb dropped on Hiroshima did not immediately lead to Japan's surrender. Despite the devastating impact, Japan's military leaders were divided on the decision to surrender. The emperor did not have all the information. The Military War Council also lessened the overall devastation. It was all anecdotal evidence. There were no photographs in that sense. There were no cell phones or drones or high-altitude aircraft taking photographs of the amount of devastation, and it certainly didn't get to the council. So a second bomb was dropped. The Soviet Union's entry into the war against Japan on August 8th, 1945 was interesting. There was a rapid advance into Japanese-occupied territories in Manchuria, and it added to the further pressure. The combination of the atomic bombings and the Soviet invasion convinced Japan's leadership that surrender was the only option to avoid total annihilation, and that was their motive. There were conversations with military generals MacArthur, Patton, that military leaders wanted to go into Russia right after the surrender of Japan and obviously Germany. But the world had had its taste of war, and they were done with it. And yes, there were atrocities that absolutely took place. MacArthur and William Leahy, who was an admiral, and others voiced that Japan was on the brink of collapse due to conventional bombing and naval blockade. But the Japanese military and their commitment to fighting to the death and the potential for extensive Allied casualties in a land invasion influenced the decision to use atomic bombs. The estimated casualties for a conventional invasion of Japan, Operation Downfall is what it was called, ranged from 250,000 to 1 million Allied soldiers and millions of Japanese casualties. And although I don't think anyone's saying that a mass casualty event is on the side of good, it saved millions of lives. And that is the truth. Because a continued invasion into Japan would have been a completely different situation, which was predominantly island hopping and naval battles, would have been a full-on invasion similar to what we saw into Germany, not something that was going to end quickly. Point number 2, the justification for U.S. involvement in World War II. Owens argues that the U.S. involvement in World War II is misrepresented, implying that the war was justified to stop the Holocaust, but the U.S. allied with Stalin, who also committed atrocities. And this one is probably one of the largest and most negligent comments made in the video. The U.S. entered World War II primarily in response to the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. The broader strategic goal was to defeat the Axis powers, including Nazi Germany, which posed a global threat. The Holocaust's full extent became widely known only as the Allies liberated concentration camps in 1945. While the Holocaust underscored the moral imperative to defeat the Nazis, it was not the initial justification for U.S. involvement or the continued involvement until 1945. The alliance with the Soviet Union, this one's muddled for sure. The alliance with the Soviet Union was a strategic necessity. After Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, Operation Barbarossa, the USSR became a crucial ally. The Eastern Front absorbed vast German resources and troops, significantly weakening Nazi Germany's ability to fight on multiple fronts. Despite Stalin's brutal regime and atrocities, including the Great Purge from 1936 to 38 and the Cadian Massacre in 1940, the Allies needed the Soviet Union to defeat Nazi Germany. Full stop. The post-war atrocities, it's important to note that the U.S. and its allies were aware of Stalin's oppressive policies, but the immediate goal of defeating the Axis powers took precedence. After the war, the Yalta Conference, February 1945, and the Potsdam Conference, July-August 1945, shaped post-war Europe, reflecting the complex balance of power and the necessity of Soviet cooperation in securing a lasting peace. The post-war atrocities and the ethnic cleansing. Candace Owens claims that post-war atrocities against Germans, including mass killings and ethnic cleansing, were ignored or justified. Now, this is one that has a lot of truth in it, and it's important to expand on a very limited time that she covered it and give you the full perspective. The expulsion of ethnic Germans from Eastern Europe in World War II was indeed a tragic and complex event. Following the war, millions of ethnic Germans were expelled from Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, and other Eastern European countries. The process began in 1945 and continued until 1947. It resulted in significant loss of life and suffering. Some of the facts and figures from this: between 12 to 14 million ethnic Germans were forcibly expelled from Eastern Europe. Approximately 500,000 to 2 million Germans died due to harsh conditions during these expulsions, including starvation, disease, and violence. The expulsions were driven by a desire to punish Germans for the war and secure national borders. While these actions were severe and led to significant suffering, they were not on the same scale or nature as systemic genocide orchestrated by Nazi Germany. It's important to understand that there were absolutely shootings, there were rapes, these things happen. It is not okay, it is horrible, it is abhorrent in 100% of the time. But, and there is a but to this, not to excuse it, but to discuss it further, the immediate aftermath of World War II saw a vengeful and chaotic environment across Europe. Europeans were absolutely pissed. They had lost family members, grandparents, uncles, aunts. It was 100% retribution towards the Germans and the Nazis. The atrocities committed by the Nazi regime had left deep scars and a powerful desire for retribution among the Allies and the liberated countries. This context influenced the harsh treatment of ethnic Germans, who were often viewed collectively as responsible for the war and its horrors. The Potsdam Agreement, signed in August 1945 by the Allied leaders, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union, sanctioned the transfer of German populations from Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. This agreement aimed to create ethnically homogeneous states to prevent further conflicts. However, the execution of these transfers was often brutal and inhumane, leading to widespread suffering. The Savage Peace, the documentary that Candace references, is a BBC documentary titled The Savage Peace, which highlights these post-war atrocities. This documentary provides valuable insight into the suffering experienced by ethnic Germans, but it is essential to understand this within the broader context of post-war retribution and the desire to prevent future German aggression. In the aftermath of war, the narratives and histories are often shaped by the victors. This phenomenon is not unique to World War II, but is a common occurrence throughout history. The victorious powers tend to emphasize their own moral justifications and downplay or exclude the own transgressions that they committed. This selective memory is part of the process of nation building and legitimizing the new post-war order. It certainly isn't new, it certainly isn't right, but it happens. And it happened with Native Americans, it happened with the Hungs, it happened with the Chinese, it happened with the Bolshevik Revolution, it happened throughout history, the Moors and the Saxons, the Persians. The Allies focused on the monumental task of rebuilding Europe and ensuring that Germany could never again rise to threaten peace. The Nuremberg trials from 45 to 46 held Nazi leaders accountable for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, highlighting the moral righteousness of the Allies' cause. However, the suffering of ethnic Germans and the injustices they faced were largely ignored in the broader narrative of victory and liberation. Let's not forget Germany and their role. To say that the German people were entirely blameless or innocent in the context of World War II is unfortunately not a consideration after Germany's role as instigator in not one, but two world wars. The First World War, 1914 to 1918, saw Germany as a central member of the Central Powers, and the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 placed heavy reparations and territorial losses on Germany fostering a sense of humiliation and resentment for the entire country, which aided in Hitler's rise to power. These conditions contributed to that rise. The Nazi Party leading to World War II, 39 to 45, and Nazi Germany's aggressive expansionism, militarism, and unprecedented atrocities committed during the Holocaust cemented its image as a belligerent and malevolent force. The Allies, having endured the horrors of 2 devastating wars, were determined to prevent any possibility of a third conflict instigated by Germany, which is interesting to Candace's closing point, where she says, essentially, it's a path to World War III. That was actually what they were trying to avoid. The harsh treatment of Germans after World War II can be seen as a part of the broader effort to dismantle German militarism and ensuring lasting peace. The collective responsibility placed on Germans, though often unjust to individuals, was driven by the desire to fundamentally reshape German society and prevent future aggression. The Allies implemented various measures to achieve the goals, including the Denazification process, which aimed to remove Nazi influence from all aspects of public life, the establishment of democratic institutions in West Germany, and the economic recovery through the Marshall Plan from 1948 to 1952 were also crucial in rebuilding a peaceful and stable Germany, and it obviously worked. Say the word Nazi in Germany and watch what happens. Candace's last point about suggesting that the current narratives about World War II are controlled to hide Western atrocities and simplify the war's history. Anybody who's watched the BBC or the History Channel knows that this is not true. We have more information at our fingertips than ever before. There are stories of Winston Churchill and the Allies doing one of the largest air raids ever on one of the richest and most valuable properties inside Germany, where all the elites lived. Thousands upon thousands hid in the basement as bombs were dropped and fires ran through the entire town. It got so hot it liquefied these people hiding to protect their lives. War is hell, and anyone who's been involved in it knows that, and the phrase is coined not because it's a hallmark moment, because it truly is a hell on earth. To pretend that horrible atrocities don't take place would be a complete lie. But we also, in the same context, can't go ahead and deny the Holocaust and how horrible the Nazi Germany regime was. You can't just go ahead and cut off your nose to spite your face. You can, but somebody who is an uppity upstart is going to go ahead and create a video challenging your perspective. While narratives about World War II have evolved, mainstream historical scholarship does not hide Western atrocities. Historians have documented and analyzed Allied actions, including the strategic bombings of German and Japanese cities, which resulted in significant civilian casualties. The firebombing of Dresden that I just mentioned in February 1945 and the bombings of Tokyo in March 1945 are notable examples. But what we don't do is talk about the repercussions of the actions of Germany and Japan, and that there was going to be retaliation, and it was severe, and it was brutal. It wasn't always right. The educational evolution of World War II, the historical education, it has increasingly included diverse perspectives. It acknowledges both the necessity of defeating the Axis powers and the moral complexities of the Allies' actions. This broader view does not diminish the atrocities committed by Nazi Germany, but provides a more comprehensive understanding of the war, which is what we should get to. As someone who respects Candace Owens and her ability to engage audiences, it's disheartening to see her spread such misleading narratives. This video she presents as fact demonstrates the dangers of a large platform being used by someone who is horribly ill-informed and downright juvenile in their thinking. We all understand the falling out that Shapiro and her had and how she's now lauded by the likes of Nick Fuentes and Jake Shields and others who are grifting on the anti-Zionist, aka I hate Jews movement. But this is embarrassing for anyone involved in this business, including Republicans, conservatives, historians, and those on the side of good. I take umbrage with the video. I don't think it is a historical representation of what is accurate. However, everyone is entitled to their opinion as long as you understand that opinion isn't necessarily fact. Folks, thanks for watching the Don't Unfriend Me show. If you like what you heard, 7 o'clock tonight, you can stop by and watch us live. If you love Candace Owens and now hate my guts, I understand. I won't take it personal, but stick around. If people bother you with what they say, maybe you should listen to them a while longer, and they might just say something that you agree with. Or maybe not. Folks, thanks for watching the Don't Unfriend Me show. I will see you next time. God bless.
Adjusting transmitter output. This is the Don't Unfriend Me Show with your hosts, Matt, Leroy, Amy, Olivia, and Mike. Geopolitics, military analysis, and election coverage. Coming to you live on the Spreely.tv network and all major social media channels at The Dumb Show. Honest, direct, unfiltered. We can agree, we can disagree. Just don't unfriend me.